Hi, everyone. So, this is Anika Leonard. I am the CEO of Priceless Insight, where our mission is to uplift the experiences of Black women, femmes, and gender expansive youth. And we do that for those who are impacted by violence, and we do prevention, intervention, and leadership development. And this is the second part of a five-part series called Crush Domestic Violence. And my intention in this series is to not cause harm or to oversimplify the domestic violence epidemic. But my intention is to like really create space for those of us in the community who are impacted by domestic violence to really like unpack the behaviors that we label as domestic violence and see how we can show up for each other just in other ways in our lives. So to recap, last week, Monday, we talked about, well, first and foremost, we poured libations and we had a moment of silence. So the libations were for those who have come before us. And the moment of silence was for all of the survivors of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, and all of those who, have been impacted by domestic and intimate partner violence. And then also those who survived attempted femicide. So, basically survived a life threatening experience. And then those who did not survive. So we had a moment of silence. And we also like discussed like the definition of domestic violence, and I kind of gave just a little bit of a piece of my journey into like hearing about this word called domestic violence, and knowing that it is widely used, like and sometimes when you say that, like, people know exactly what you're talking about. But then sometimes people could just say domestic violence, and most people don't even say domestic violence, but sometimes when they do, it's assumed that they're only talking about certain things. And so what I wanted to do was really describe that it is a pattern of behavior. And that pattern of behavior can show up in a number of different ways. It can show up like physically, mentally, emotionally, through sexual violence. It can show up through economic abuse. It can show up through using the kids, through coercion. Like, there are so many different ways that domestic violence shows up. But I also talked about, like, like learning about this epidemic of domestic violence, and how my viewpoints have shifted since I've learned about this epidemic, right? And so now I really want to censor and use words and practices that really promote healing and wholeness in the community. And so because of that, I was really interested in using the words like patriarchal violence. And so patriarchal violence, you'll find the definition of patriarchal violence on Priceless Insights website. I mean, not our website, but our Facebook page, and also our what is that thing called? It's our Facebook page, and it's our Instagram page. I knew it would come to me eventually. So you'll find the definition of those, on our website. So, or on our Facebook and Instagram page. So please, please, please go, to those spaces and like, like our pages, subscribe, and also like find out more about this topic that I'm mentioning, patriarchal violence. So I'm just going to type it in the chat so you all know how to spell it, and hopefully I can spell it right. So working on that. And patriarchal violence is a phrase that was coined through Black feminist futures, so I'm also putting their information on here too. And you can find out more about like what it is and like solid examples of patriarchal violence on their website as well. So by all means, like, you all are welcome to go and like just do some research and figure out like what exactly what terminology really fits for you. So like I said, I kind of did some work and some shed some insight on my journey. and like going from domestic violence to now saying, okay, we're going to talk about patriarchal violence. And one of the biggest differences is when we talk about domestic violence, which is basically like a pattern of behavior that people use to, like have control and power over people, usually in intimate partner relationships. But like wherever there is a power imbalance, there's a potential for violence, and there's a potential for harm to be caused. And so I want to just to, like put a pin in that and make sure that we come back to that, because I'm going to share some personal experiences a little later. And so when I'm talking about like creating spaces like of healing and promoting wholeness, like the only way that I know how to do that is to really show up as myself, like authentically, 100% Anika, the good, the bad, the ugly, like all of it. And so what I am interested in doing now is just really just showing up. I'm really interested in shifting language from like people who have caused harm. They're typically called perpetrator or abuser, and so I'm really interested in naming them as a person who's caused harm, because to me that means that like that they have hope. Like I have hope in their healing. I have hope that they can shift that behavior. And like people who have been impacted, particularly those who have like firsthand experience, I really just kind of relate to them as people who are people who have been harmed by domestic violence or intimate partner violence. And some people are identify with the term victim, some people identify with the term survivor, some people identify with the term thriver. I mean, all of those are valid. I'm just speaking from my experience and the information that I have right now. I'm really interested in using people who cause harm, and which is really the language that leans towards transformative justice, which is, like I said, it is a way to reduce harm on all levels. And that includes intimate, interpersonal, institutional, and societal. So let me backtrack just a little bit. So the biggest differences between domestic violence and patriarchal violence is like domestic violence names harm, but it's primarily within an intimate partner relationship. And patriarchal violence not only looks at the harm that is within that interpersonal violence relationship, it also looks at the ways that institutions contribute to the harm that's being caused. And particularly when we look at the Black community, we know that a lot of people who are impacted by domestic violence, who are harmed by domestic violence, like they don't want to call the police, because the police will oftentimes make it worse with bias, with stereotypes. And I mean, I don't think I need to go into detail about like the relationship between the Black community and the police department as a whole, right? Like I think we all know that there's some problems there and some historical problems there, right? And so sometimes calling the police is not the answer. And so with that transformative justice, and like please look that up. I'm gonna actually type that into the chat as well. This is some work from a woman named Mia Mingus, and beautiful work. And it basically accounts for the humanity of all people involved. Because just because a person has committed harm, like I said, it does not mean that they are not, redeemable. And I know that that's up for debate, because there are some really like horrible things that have been happening out in our community. And some of us may never forgive folks for what's happened. And some of us do have space for forgiveness. And so for those of us who do, like leaning towards this transformative justice framework, like really works for us, right? So I wanted to talk about like the power and control wheel. I want to just kind of go back to that, because we look at the power and control wheel and we say, okay, well, those behaviors are from those people, those abusers, those perpetrators. And what I would like to do is just to encourage us to look at the ways that we could possibly be the people who have caused harm unknowingly. I'm not saying that it was on purpose or anything of that nature, but there are definitely ways that we have shown up and or caused harm in different relationships that we have. And so I wanted to make sure that I also, like, just kind of pointed that out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat um, resources and definitions for the things that I just discussed. There's a Black Power and Control wheel. There's a definition for patriarchal violence, and then there's a link there. And then there's also a definition and a description of transformative justice along with the link. And one of the things that I was really, really drawn to is a quote by Ayanla Banzan. And so I'm also going to put this quote in the chat. And Ayanla, well, actually, I'm gonna go back just a little bit. I'm not gonna go on Ayanla yet, because if you know anything about Ayanla, like she be giving it. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to put a definition for or some examples for physical abuse in the chat. And with these examples, oh, looks like I'm not able to do that right. Oh, yeah, okay. So with these examples, you'll see hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, biting, hair pulling, things of that nature, right? All of these things are done to, and this is not like it's not an exhaustive list, but all of these things are done to a person by their intimate partner, and or because domestic violence is not just intimate partners. It could also be like people in your family who are causing this harm because you all are living together in a household, right? And so most times when we hear about domestic violence, it's like that intimate partner, but it could also be between parents and children. It could also be between siblings. It can also be between like other family members, as long as they are like all cohabitating the same residence. So we can also look at these as examples of how people who cohabitate the same residence are also at risk of being harmed, and having it not labeled as something as severe as domestic violence. And also people who, like are cool and comfortable with labeling it as domestic violence, right? So we'll see a lot of like the domestic violence within family relationships. We'll see that with like elder abuse, like our elders are getting older, and you may have one person in the household who is, like maybe taking care of the elder, but like also like doing some economic abuse, like doing fraud or manipulation to restrict their access to their checks, and whatever those checks or income could be. It could be, like selling their meds. It could be like any and everything, right? And so I'm going to actually add in some other examples, but I want to just kind of pause by this physical abuse, because like I said, I wanted to share that quote from Ayanla. But I wanted to share that quote. I was really interested in sharing that quote because it really struck a chord for me. For example, right? Like I said, I don't know how to show up for this conversation other than to show up 100% authentically as, Anika. And at this point, this is where I just bear it all, right? So if I look at domestic violence or the power and control wheel, and I look at some of these examples of physical abuse, I have done some of these things to my children. I have whooped them, for instance. And I know in the Black community, like we kind of go on this, like some people are for whooping, some people are completely against it. I was raised in a household where it was nothing wrong with it. And so and I'm saying that because like people do the best that they can until they have the wisdom, knowledge, and experience to do better, right? And so now I know better. I know that it was not okay to hit or slap or, fill in the blank. It was not okay to harm my children physically, right? Just because they were not doing what I wanted them to do. There were other tools that I did not have access to at the time. But at this point, that's that's kind of a mute point. Like the harm that I caused to my children by like hitting them, like that harm has already been done. And so at this point, it's my job and it's my responsibility to like just to step up and say like, hey, look, I know I did this. I know that it was not right. Because it wasn't just like physically, like hitting them or whooping them. I also cussed them out on occasion too, And that was so normal for me to do. And a lot of times, like, domestic violence is learned in the household, but I have never heard my mom utter a cuss word, you know. Domestic violence is like, it's everywhere. It is in movies, it is in relationships at school, as young as like in middle school, you know, like the violence is everywhere. So it is no it's no wonder that, you know, people pick up on it. So I just wanted to just like add that.
Mom.
Oh, we have a question.
Um, Hi. My name is Nia. I'm Nika's daughter. So something I wanted to add to that as well is like a perfect example of like in today's society right now is that one of the things that is happening in like celebrity news or whatever is that like Blueface and Christian Rock situation. Like
Hmm.
we've seen them abuse each other in the video through message and go through back and forth in this like unhealthy relationship, and now it's being perpetuated by them creating a show centered around this relationship and watching the abuse that they inflict on each other. It's in
Thank you.
everything.
Thank you. Did you hear what I was just sharing about the harm that I caused you all with whooping you and cussing you out and stuff?
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts about that?
um
I mean, you don't have to. I know that probably maybe it blindsided you a little bit. I'm not sure, but
no, not really. I felt like just the way that you started that conversation, I was like, oh, she might say something to me. um no, I feel like honestly, um in that piece, like I feel like as like the firstborn and like being in a space where I was aware, like I was the oldest and I was aware of a lot of things at a pretty young age. And so even with the whoopings and even with the discipline that was carried out in our household, and not just from you but other relatives, was like it was normalized, but it was also like after a while I understood why. I understood
mhm,
um like how this was unfolded, which was different for me, but we also had communication between us once I got older as well to be able to resolve a lot of that trauma that I experienced as a child. So it really was um like a full circle for us.
mhm,
But I know that that's not always the case for a lot of people. I get that told a lot. So to me, a lot is that people don't always get a chance to sit down and have a conversation with their mom or their parent or the guardian in general about the things that they've experienced in the household as a childhood, and being able to even reconcile and move forward together too.
mhm. Do you want to talk about like how we did it? Because I'm talking about transformative justice and like, um, I mean, I know I saw earlier that you said you probably weren't going to be able to make it, so I'm like, oh, okay. But since you're here, if you have time and space, you can definitely add to, you know, like what that process was like for you. And if
Hmm.
not, you know, like that's fine too. You know, like.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit. I think it was really so it started with, I don't know, I like to write letters as a kid. I like to write stuff down, and like I didn't care like where I left it or what I did with it. And I felt like I got inspired to like write you a letter. I think it was like one of them Oprah things or whatever, like where you like write a letter and then you like burn it, but I didn't burn it. Like I left it somewhere and then I ended up giving it to you. And then
Mhm,
like you read it and you took your time to read it. And then I think it was after a little bit. I don't think it was like I think it was like a couple of days or so. Like you invited me to like go get coffee and we talked through like a lot of the stuff that I wrote in the note. And this was right before I left for I think this was about the year before I left for college
mhm.
originally.
It was the year you left for college.
The year I left for college, and
Mhm,
yeah. Oh yeah, the summer
mhm,
before, or the summer before I left for college. So yeah, that was that was something, that was a intense experience, but it was also like super helpful for like rebuilding our relationship and giving us a foundation. And I feel like and my mindset was to like leave Milwaukee and like not necessarily be in a space where I didn't look back, but like I didn't necessarily want to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up like dropping out and coming back just because of like making sure that, you know, things were good at home and stuff. But for the most part, like, yeah, like that conversation helps me be able to come back to home. Like,
I didn't that's the first time I've heard you verbalize that part, that the conversation helped you come back, and that you weren't planning to come back. And I think that that is that's so true for so many like
mm-hmm,
relationships, so many parental relationships, like you just said. Like we oftentimes don't get a chance to like talk about what happened and how it impacted us.
mm-hmm,
I feel like a lot of parents, just based on what I've heard in classrooms over the years and things like that. I feel like a lot of parents just kind of have this wall put up, like they don't want to hear about what they've done to cause harm. Like maybe they meant it, maybe they didn't mean it, maybe it was consciously, maybe it was subconsciously, but whatever the case may be, sometimes we don't want to hear that. And I'll just say,
mm-hmm,
as a parent, it was really difficult to like sit there and read about like the way you experienced me,
mm-hmm,
because like in my head I had an idea about like what kind of parent I was. I knew I wasn't perfect and I wasn't the best, but I also didn't know that you were so impacted by some of the things that you listed in the letter. And so
mm-hmm.
I really needed to take my time and read that, and I really needed to like make sure that my next move was my best move, like as they say. And so that next move was that best move.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember when we sat in that coffee shop for like 5 hours, like,
Yeah.
and we drank, ate, cried, ate again,
Mm-hmm.
drank more coffee, tea, like you name it, saw
Yeah.
lots of people from the community who did not know that this incredibly powerful moment was happening. So thank
Yeah.
you for, like speaking to it, and for also pointing out the violence that's happening in the relationship. What's the name of the two people again?
Blueface and Christian Rock.
Yes, yes, because I saw like I saw a lot of news about them, and one thing about that transformative justice framework is that it, like I said, it allows us to have humanity, and I think with
Mm-hmm.
us being even before the pandemic, we were already a group of people, humans who, like if there's an accident, we slow down to see what's going on. If
Yeah.
there's a fight, we pull out our phone and try to see, like, try to capture. If there's someone dead lying in the street, it's like we've lost connection to each other and to our humanity. And for this young couple who is obviously in an extreme amount of pain, to
Mm-hmm.
be like externalizing it through physical violence, like no matter who's watching or what's happening, like that's an opportunity for healing. I really, really, really hope Ayanla, like I don't think she does it anymore, but she be getting people life together.
Yeah. Yeah. For
So
real.
yeah.
We definitely need like a young bird, like I don't know, like a disciple of Ayana to like be able to do that space, like and be able to, you know, reach this generation of folks because I feel like it really there's a certain level of like cultural context that comes with like being rappers and you know being on that level, but then also being young and having so much attention on you all the time and
Hmm.
also being tailored to grow up thinking like you have to find the one and that one has to be your one and like no matter what y'all go through like y'all always have to stick it out and like
Yeah.
even Tyga is like tweeting talking about he wants somebody to be as ride or die for him as Christian is for Blueface and it's like I wouldn't idolize a relationship that is centered around like a heavy amount of like physical and mental and emotional abuse.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, and it's sad to see it glorified, especially when our community, as specifically the Black community, is already having so many issues with Black couples in the community in the media.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not gonna get on my like conspiracy soapbox, but I think that we are intentionally portrayed, in those ways,
Hmm.
because like regardless of what kind of behavior it is, there is an institution that benefits from it.
Right.
Like there's somebody's going to make some money off of the dysfunction, um, and behaviors, I should say, in our community. So yeah. So normally I would like these are like, basically like a half hour. And so we have about 5 minutes. And I wanted to just like leave space open to see if there's anyone who had any comments. Ania, if you had anything else to add before we sign off, or like just basically leave it open and see what's up. What's up with folks? What are you thinking?
I mean, we can leave it open. I'm not really feeling called to say anything in that and yeah, I can't talk today.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting sick too.
Yeah. I turned on the furnace and I've been coughing ever since.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
we getting it together though.
okay, so Etheline is saying we should start the healing process. Absolutely. Oh, and okay, so wait a minute. So Ania's not my only child. Let me say this. I have a son. I have a son who's 26, and our process looked a little different than Ania's and I. Ania's and I, that ours took place maybe uh 6 years, 7 years ago, something like that. And my son and I, like, we ours took a little bit longer, so we started having those conversations maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Not because I wasn't ready to, like, I thought I was ready to, but the timing wasn't right, so we started having our conversations. And they just look like me picking him up to go get something to eat, because I will bribe you with food in a heartbeat when I want to talk to you, and he will tell you that. So we go get you a full belly, and then we go have a little conversation. But
Hey,
that
it was not by chance that I got the coffee because that's all I was drinking.
so yeah, I just wanted to add that. I added in Priceless Insights Twitter information, my LinkedIn, Instagram. Follow us, leave comments, like tag us if you heard or saw anything that you really liked. Join our email list on our website. I added that into the email as well. And I'm definitely open to answer any questions, and particularly to the parents out there who could have possibly caused harm to their children. And I'm not calling it domestic violence, because I think that shuts down the conversation. And that's a framework that I really like, is useful in describing some behaviors, but it doesn't serve my purposes for having a conversation that gears us towards healing and wholeness in the Black community. And so what I want to do is to make sure that we are keeping those doors open, and saying that, like, if you have resonated with anything that I've said today, please feel free to DM me, reach out, if you want to continue the conversation. And then next week at the same time, we will be here having this conversation again. I'm not sure who's going to pop up, so you never know. But we're going to have this conversation. We're going to continue it. And thank you, Lissa, for your comments. Yeah, so thank you all, and we will see you next week. Peace.